Interestingly, everyone thinks it's out. I can bring it after the cycle, Captain Mark, every right cycle, also. That's what we're talking about. We're controlling, primarily focusing on, I think the people, like it's body stuff. Uh, Everybody catch King Mackerel? Everybody King Mackerel too? Um, you know, if we kind of go back and history, Destin was really still on King Mackerel. When I grew up as a kid, uh, oh, there's everybody's talking. Back when I was a kid, I'm not gonna, you know, I'm much smarter and wiser today than I was back then, you know, didn't, I guess don't, do none of that.
Pictures, that's how we fished when I was a kid. And I actually think we do a lot of things now to make king mackerel fishing easy, but the way we did it when I was a kid, we ran 2 hand lines on number 5 planers. We ran 2 number 3 planers, 2 flat lines, and a flying, and then a long shotgun rig out of the center thing. So we were trolling actually 7 lines. And if you went to the docks today and asked most of the deckhands to make a pin rig for cigar minnows and trolling for king mackerels, we trolled with all we trolled with back then was dead cigar minnows. But this is a pin rig. We're gonna pass this one around and let you look at it. But this is still ways of catching king mackerel. Very, very few people fish this way anymore. But the rig just has this little wire. You'll see it. I'm sure y'all can't see it from here, but it just goes through the cigar minnow's nose, clips on. You know, you take your cigar minnow before you put him in the water, bend him, crack his vertebrae so that he'll swim real good. The whole key to this rig is the cigar minnow is swimming and not spinning. And you'd slide the duster down over his nose, and then you put him in the water and look at him. And if he's swimming good, you just let him on out. But if he's sitting there spinning like a propeller, just take the rod and give it a quick little yank through the water. Most of the time that would straighten him out. If that didn't, we'd just take him and go smack him on the water one time, and then he would normally start swimming. But that's, you know, we're going to talk a lot more about rigs later, but this is how Destin was built king mackerel fishing. That's just a little more history about how everything started around here. It would work, it would definitely work for wahoo, but you would have to upsize. You know, you'd really want to use ballyhoo instead of a cigar minnow, where this is rigged on like number 5 or number 6 wire. We would go to like number 10 wire for wahoos and bigger hooks. But the same basic rig, yes, just larger would work for wahoos, no problem. It's just, you know, you can actually buy a rigged ballyhoo today, which would be rigged very similar, not quite the same way, but real similar. But, you know, there's just a little bit of history about king mackerel fishing here in town, you know, and to me, I think you'd probably say for your clients, it's a super exciting fish for clients to be able to catch. It's a fit, you know, the speed, the size, the way they run, jump, just everything that they'll do, it has to be some of the best fishing for a client that they've never done anything like that freshwater fishing.
Absolutely, and I get people from all over the place. You don't know if they're from like a town in Illinois or their dad was a TV charter captain. But I tell guys, normally I'll try it at least. I mean, we always joke and say how long to spend on a certain amount of time, or on how much time to spend on a certain spot. But I'll try it at least once during the day, and I fish differently and I think totally atypical of normal Destin king fishing. But I tell everybody on my trips, like, if you think there's a king on, there's not. Like and they're like, well, look at the rod tip. It's kind of moving a little bit. I'm like, oh no, you'll know. If you think it's on, it's not. And then all of a sudden it happens, and people are like, that's what you meant. But we do it a little different. We'll get into all that stuff. But it's at the end of the day, I ask people, like, what was your favorite fish of the day? Was it one of those 10 snapper we had? And typically they're like, no, it was that bonita. That bonita was my favorite fight of the day. But I think until like halfway through the fight, maybe watching the rod tip respond a certain way, you don't know if it's a king or a bonita anyway.
Yeah.
But to watch that fight and watch people kind of end up holding the rod this way and reeling it in a certain way, it's a lot of fun.
And, you know, king mackerel get a little bit of a bad rep on edibility-wise. You know, I don't want to eat a 30-pound king mackerel. Those are not going to be as good if you want to fry it or grill it or do something like that. King mackerel, especially the bigger they are, the oilier they do get. But they are one of the best fish to make smoked fish dip out of. Because of that oil inside of them, they don't dry out on the smoker, and that's a lot of people, that's their biggest thing, is that they can't keep, you know, I love cobia. I thought, well, you know, I had a bunch of cobia one year, we're gonna make smoked cobia dip. Well, I won't say that it was horrible.
But you won't do that again.
Yeah, the problem was, by the time I smoked it, it was so dry that the normal mix of ingredients, well, it was just like eating sawdust almost. So I kept putting in more and more sour cream and more mayonnaise to make to where you could actually have some mouth texture to it. Well, by then you couldn't taste the smoke flavor. You could just taste all the sour cream and mayonnaise. So, but it was too dry of a fish. But the smaller king mackerel, the ones that are definitely below 12 pounds and up to 15 pounds, those are excellent eating fish.
Those are delicious fish.
Especially if you properly ice your fish. And this is true with almost anything you fish with. I'm sure don't you do a slush brine every day?
I do. And luckily,
how do you make a slush brine?
On my boat, I don't want to say I'm getting lazier the more I fish, but luckily I run an Everglades 243, and that fish box on the front has its own plug that goes straight into the bottom or straight into the water. So typically in the morning when I fill up my fish box with ice, once we catch something good, I'll just pull that plug and let that fish box start to inflate and put the plug right back in. Or on my old boat, I used just a big 5-gallon bucket. Yeah. You know, just dump it in there.
But any fish that you're going to take home to eat, if you just lay it on ice, that gets the fish cool, but it doesn't get the fish cold. If when you first get out there, whatever you're fishing for, whether it's kings or snappers or whatever, catch a few fish and throw them all in the fish box, that's fine. But after you get a few and you're going to go to your next spot, you want to pull some of them fish out, scoop up a good amount of the ice, put the fish back in, throw the ice on top of them, and then fill that rest of that fish box with salt water. The salt water is just like making ice cream, and it will lower the freezing temperature of that water. It will get much, much colder, and when you get home, your fish, I don't care what species it is, will be better.
And your hands will be very cold trying to get all the fish out of the fish box. Like, it'll sting cold.
No.
But depending on the type of fish too, like certain fish, I don't think it matters nearly as much, like snappers, things like that, but especially with tunas and kings too, a lot.
Tunas, kings, maybe we should say pelagics, most all pelagics probably.
Yeah, we will sometimes go the extra effort on brain spiking it, bleeding it out. And sometimes it's as easy as just taking the hand gaff that we use,
I actually didn't bring a hand guy.
or a pair of pliers or something, or my hands, and just kind of ripping the gill before we get him in there. At minimum, just gill him and let its heart pump that blood out. But I like to brain spike it and kill it, just so it's not slowly dying in the ice and flopping around and beating itself up or whatever. But there's a whole process, a whole way to prepare fish a certain way, but we can get into that later.
Yeah. And
yeah, so I did that for a while with the wires and all that stuff, but it's really straightforward, to be honest with you. Brain spike it, bleed it out,
cut the
gut
tail.
gut it, and then actually brain spike it. Long story short, the way I do is I'll brain spike it, I'll cut the gill. On the bottom of the spine is the artery. I'll cut up from the bottom, and you'll just see the blood start pouring out. Then I'll cut to the spine and break the spine, run my wire down the neural canal, which is on the top of the spine. You'll actually see the hole. I find it's a lot easier to go in from the tail than it is from the brain spike. Then gut it and toss all that over and get them in the ice. But it takes a couple minutes for each fish. It's not a big deal, but it does make a huge difference on certain fish. Snappers, not really so much, from what I've seen. Just bleed them out. Just pop the gill. Good enough.
There's a bunch of older pictures.
That's awesome.
You know, they're very apt to do this. I mean, don't know how many times that I've had a fish jump behind the boat, and he jumps out of the water and he's got your bait in his mouth and he hits the water and the line goes screaming. I mean, kings can be very, very exciting fish. And talking about, ways to cook king mackerel, one of my favorite things to do with them is, I fillet them off, skin them, cut their bloodline out, but cut them up in just like little bite-sized chunks, and we marinate them in Italian dressing, and then we put some dry Italian dressing into the breading and deep fry that. Oh my God, that's good. It's easy to do. That was one of your fish, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was one of mine.
Go back. You were talking about going to the fish box. I don't know how well y'all can see this, but for anybody who doesn't know, king mackerels have a mouthful of razor blades. Have enough live bait leaders, whatever, extra lures. When you gaff one, gaff it, go to the fish box, open the fish box, put it in, close the fish box, cut the line, tie on a new rig, and don't worry about what's in that fish's mouth, because they will send you to the emergency room needing stitches.
I got cut once on a dead king mackerel. Trying to open his mouth for a picture, just for one of these, just getting his mouth open just enough with my thumb. A dead fish cut me.
Well, I'm
I have
pretty
pictures and videos of, we take a lot of pictures on the boat. I have all of this on my phone in my pocket.
I think since I've known you, I have a picture every year of you in the walk-in clinic for something.
I have a picture I'll send you from this year.
Of course, everything that we talk about for kings, all these things will work for the nearshore mahis and bonitas and things like that. I know that some of these are probably a little bit small for y'all to see, but these are just basic trolling setups. And if you're going to troll multiple rods, one of the biggest things that you need to be aware of is spacing. If you have all the rods at the same distance, and you go and you want to troll around a particular spot, let's say the broken bottom when we're trolling around one of the big rocks, and we want to make some passes around there. If you have everything the same length, when you go to make a turn, everything is going to get tangled. But having 25 to 50 foot spacings between them will greatly increase decrease the likelihood of you ever having a tangle, because they'll all be going into the water at different angles. So when you turn, they'll do like this, and you will hardly ever get a tangle if you have good spacing. And I posted the king mackerel all the slides that are in here, I posted on a post about a week ago, but I'll repost them on our Facebook page tonight, this whole little thing. So you can have, because I have different things here to where it shows whether you're trolling with trolling leads or planers and all the different depths that everything will go by or troll at. But that way you have, but I have our Facebook page is Half Hitch Destin, and I'll make sure I post this when I get home tonight so you can pull up all these little infographics. You know, rods and reels. Literally, most anything you have will work. The one thing that, you know, that you do want to have for kings is kings have a very soft mouth. And this particular rod of mine, y'all can come up here after the thing and pull on this one. This rod is really, I brought it just for demo, but this one is too stiff. We want a rod with a very, very light tip. Star rods make some special kingfish rods. They have a lot of backbone in them, but they do have a super light tip in them. But something this heavy is not good. You'll pull off a lot of good quality fish on a rod that's too stiff. You know, something much lighter works much better. And there's, you know, so we can troll for king mackerel. We can fly line, which means taking a live bait and throwing it out behind the back of the boat. And then if you see schools of bait fish working out there, we throw some smaller lures, which Mark will tell you how to do that.
Yeah. No?
Yeah.
So when I started running my trip, I mean, I'm not from Destin. I got here, I was like, I'm just going to figure out stuff and fish my way and however I want to do it. And if it works, awesome. But if it doesn't, cool. Most of you guys were right when you said that would never work. But I mean, you can admit I'm too stubborn to take advice from most people. So I was prepared to fail on my own.
Stubborn?
But when I couldn't really find too many fish the first couple months when I was fishing, I trolled a lot more than I like to admit now. But for me, for kings, and like I said, bonitas too, because I came from New England where albies were like a trophy fish. I mean, everybody waited all year for those things to show up, and people love catching them, and better prizes for those than some of the striper tournaments. Just a fun fish to catch. So I would just drop 2 spinning rods, just probably like you guys have for anything really, as long as it would drag one of the plugs behind the boat. And I would just troll 2 crystal minnows off the back. And I think I caught almost as many kings the first couple years, just driving from spot to spot, dragging those. That's not true at all. I'm catching a lot more now, I'll be honest. But driving around at first, that was almost all I did was just put my spinning rod, and yeah, I trolled on spinning gear, and wait for a fish to bite. And when I hook it, awesome. Maybe I'll go back over that spot, try it again, and I still fish some of those spots now that I found whenever, 6 years ago or whatever, just by trolling around driving. So yeah, like there are big, crazy 5-rod spreads, and where I started fishing on the Chesapeake Bay, those guys now are running 32-rod spreads. So you could absolutely, and those guys are probably catching a lot more fish, but I think we're having a lot more fun. So once you find them, that's the hard part. So finding them is the hard part, and then catching them, I think, is easier. So if you know they're there, if you troll over them and you get a bite, great. But if you troll all day back and forth and you don't get a bite, maybe they're not there, maybe they're not feeding, right?
Yep. You know, and most of the charter boats now, very few of them actually fish traditional trolling like the duster that's going around. And then so we got dead bait trolling, and we got live bait trolling, and we have lure trolling. Most of the charter fleet all lure fishes now because it's just easier. And with a 3 fish per person limit, most of the days they can catch what they need just trolling lures, and it's much easier. They don't have to worry with buying dead bait or catching live bait, and the lures work. You know, whether it's the Nomads or the Yozuris or the Rapalas, they all work.
I mean, it's pretty easy to just, if you think there's something there, if you're driving home or whatever, just have one of those. Like typically for me, I run almost all of my lines, whether I'm bottom fishing or trolling or doing anything with it, with one of these snaps. And it's pretty easy to keep one of these on a 6-foot leader and just clip that on and toss it over the side and drive around a couple minutes and see if there's anything there. I think normally, and we've talked about it in previous seminars about how long to spend on a spot. And I think you've always said, give it some time, right?
10 or 15 minutes.
Yeah, I give it about 4 before I'm like, there's nothing here, let's go. So it's for me, it's kind of although you and I had a day, maybe 4 years ago, where I told you, I was like, we're on an awesome king bite, we're catching them on jigs every day, this will be awesome. And we had nothing at all for like an hour on that spot, and then we both hooked up on the last cast, and I thought yours was a cobia, and I tried to net your king mackerel.
Yes, and you lost my king mackerel.
No, we got it in the boat. We got both of those. I have pictures of that.
Okay, if you say so.
But so I think for guys who don't spend as much time out there on the water, finding them is going to be the hard part. And driving around, trolling for them from spot to spot while somebody's on the boat marking or watching the sonar, and you're looking for bait, especially big piles of bait on high relief structures. Then once you find them, then I think the fun part of king mackerel fishing comes in.
And if you really want to learn to bottom fish, you need to learn how to fish natural bottom. And the best way to learn natural bottom is to go out there and do what we call live bait trolling. So with a dead bait, we're going to troll in that really probably 3 to 5 mile an hour range, and trolling lures is really going to be more in that 3 to 4 and up to 6 miles an hour. But live bait trolling, it's kind of basically just as slow as you can possibly go, kind of in gear, because you don't want to drown the live baits, but just as slow as you can go, and this one can't swim over and tangle up this one. Well, if you have an area that's wherever that you want to go out and research that area for some future snapper, grouper fishing on natural bottom, well, that takes some time to really troll through even a 1 mile square area. Well, if it's an area that's good for snappers, groupers, and jacks, well, it's probably the same thing. If it's holding that much bait that it's going to hold those same natural bottom areas are going to hold king mackerel. So you go out there and put you a couple of live baits out and just start making, little passes through there. And you might be covering a mile, but you're going to do this, and then you're going to do this. And the whole time watching that bottom machine, that's how you really get good at bottom fishing, is learning those natural bottom areas. But this live bait king mackerel fishing is perfect for that. Catch fish while you learn to catch other fish. The graphic that I threw back up here, the king mackerel start to bite as early as late March, and they'll bite all the way up into December most of the time. In early spring, late fall, you can catch a lot of fish just surface trolling. But as we get, the next several months, especially as we go through this really hot period, and this will apply to wahoo fishing and stuff offshore also, that you're going to catch a lot of fish at depth. In this particular scenario, I've got a flat line out, a rig on a 2-ounce trolling lead, a rig on a 4-ounce trolling lead, and this could be either a downrigger, a 6 or 8 ounce trolling lead, or a planer, and then maybe something even really deep on a downrigger. Downriggers, the lipped baits, most of them will run about 10 or 12 feet. 4-ounce trolling lead will probably troll 6 feet below the surface. A planer that we'll talk about in a minute that's on this rod, this will run about 20 feet deep. And then a downrigger, we can fish on a downrigger as deep as we want to fish. Trolling 200 feet on a downrigger is nothing. But being able to cover more water this way and this way greatly increases your chances. And a lot of times you'll see somebody that'll be trolling along and they get a bite and they immediately take the boat out of gear. Don't do that. Keep the boat moving. If the fish is bitten over here and he's running this way, kind of turn into him, but just keep trolling. Most of the time you'll find that whatever the rod is you have deepest, that got the first bite. It is that fish, as you start to reel him in and he's coming to the surface, that one gets bit, then this one, then this one, then this one, then this one. And you'll catch multiple fish at a time by just continually trolling while you're fighting the one fish.
I agree if the goal is catching the most amount of fish. I absolutely agree. Like if you were on a boat doing that, you would catch more than me. On my boat though, I like to have fun. And if we're not fishing for sustenance. You don't need 15 king mackerels to eat because you're not going to freeze them. They don't freeze well. You can smoke them, but you don't need hands of them. And,
Sure I do.
so I like to have fun. So if I hook a king on a spinning rod on the troll, I will take the boat out of gear and I will let you stand in the corner going, what do I do? This thing is running full speed in every direction, because that's why I like to fish. Because I like that, oh, snap. I don't know how to, I can't say what I call that moment, but I like people to fight fish. I like people to remember it. I like the fun. And I think sometimes too, if you fight a 20-pound king on something like this, if we get it to the boat, awesome, but people will remember that. And I think that's the whole reason why we do this, is to have fun. So yeah, I think for me personally, while I completely agree with you, you'll catch more, you'll catch bigger fish, you'll catch better fish, but you're gonna hear us a couple hundred yards away screaming and jumping up and down laughing.
For what, your oh shit moment that you didn't want to say?
Yeah, my oh shit moment.
Okay, I said it.
It's every day on my boat we look for the oh shit moment, and it's pretty easy to get, whether it's, whatever we're fishing for. But if you hook a king on something like this, I don't care if you are a Baptist priest, you're gonna go, oh shit. It's fun to watch that happen. And then I think too, and I don't want to hijack your trolling stuff, but I'll get into my whole thing. There's a way to fight fish and get them to the boat fast and easy, and that fish is healthier. If you release it, they swim away better. There's a way to fight the fish on certain gear that is better for everybody. But we'll get to that.
And it's, there's so many ways to catch fish, whether it's kings or mahis or blackfin tunas, because we can troll for them. We can pitch jigs at them, which Mark likes to do. And then whenever you're bottom fishing, any day you go bottom fishing, we both, he has his, I got mine. We always have a fly line rigged up. And we're going to put either a live or a dead cigar minnow on this. And, if you're using your trolling motor, you're going to want to take this and pitch it off the back of the boat and just let it be free lining out there. You'll be surprised what you catch on a flatline rig behind the boat while you're bottom fishing. It can be a king, it can be a tuna, it can be a mahi, and in many cases, you may find that your biggest red snapper of the day comes on this little rig sitting out behind the back of the boat on the surface, not on the bottom.
Yep.
Many days, your biggest king, your biggest fish is going to come off this rig. And the fly line rig kind of got... can be live or frozen. Oh.
I've started, so my fly line is, for whatever reason, April, right when we're kind of waiting for the kings to show up, we had a couple days of good kings. And then for whatever reason, one day I just woke up and my stinger was a little frayed or something, and I was like, I'm just gonna tie on fluoro and see what happens. We started catching blackfins. And I think this year so far, I've caught more blackfins than I've caught kings. And I'm at the point now where when I throw my flat line out, I'm gonna start with fluoro and a single hook with a live bait on it. And if I start getting bit off, I'll switch to wire. But I'd rather get the bite and know that something's there than have a stinger out and wonder if I missed a blackfin or something. At least spring, most of spring anyway.
Yeah. And the live bait rig, we of course sell these pre-made. You can come in and buy them. They're either $3.99 or $4.99. They're just called Carolina live bait rigs. And we sell them pre-made. You know, but by the same token, and you can live bait troll with this, or you can free line behind the boat with this. But we call this the 30-second king mackerel rig. I mean, there's literally a piece of 40-pound wire, your treble hook, and I'm gonna talk for a minute before I tie it. But there's a flat side and a high side to the treble hook, and then we have our single hook to hook the minnow on with, and a swivel. But to make the 30-second king rig is really this fast. If I didn't have 90-pound wire instead of 40, it would be easier.
Gonna say something.
Yep, I snell the hook on this end. Oh, and I need glasses. This is too small.
Oh, there we go.
Thank you. Somebody's looking out after me. I'm gonna make it this one out of mono like we would for tunas, just because it's a little easier for me to feel and see. But I go through the hook, I make 6 wraps on the treble hook, go back through the eye of the treble, that locks it in place. Then we take our single hook, run it on, come down to about what size I think my bait fish are, wrap 6 wraps down the single hook, back through the eye, take my swivel, and I just made a live bait king mackerel rig.
It's cool. I've seen Tim on my boat tie that with wire, and I've learned a lot from fishing with you over the past couple of years. But one of the things that I use a lot, and I'll be honest, I have a video of you doing it that I refer to, especially in springtime, because you don't tie knots with wire often. So in the springtime, sometimes I'll pull up one of Tim's videos or something and watch his stranded wire knots. Because I fish with stranded wire when I'm fishing for kings, not solid wire.
And that's what this was that I was trying to use. It was just, I grabbed the wrong spool when I left the house. This was 90 and not 40 pounds. It should be 40-pound wire. It just wouldn't twist.
Oh.
Thank you, sir. Then we both walked in front of the TV.
Yep.
Oh well. People at home will get over it.
Yeah.
But you can add little dusters to your stinger rigs.
Tim, how do you feel about adding a duster to a flat line?
I love it. You probably say no, right?
No. Just
a lot of times I don't have one on there because I'm lazy. But adding a little.
I'm a lazy fisherman. I'll admit that. Like most of what I'll say is like, this is, like I'll tell you to do a certain way. I'm like, in reality, this is what I would want to do, but I'm on a charter. Like I don't have all day to go out looking for stuff. If I go to a spot and they're not there in 10 minutes, I'm gone. So I'm a lazy fisherman now.
No. And you have to be, because you got to produce bites. I'm the same way.
Is it lazy though, or is it more work?
It's time management.
Maybe lazy would be sitting on the same spot waiting all day, right?
Yep. So, it's just like last Monday, I would have kind of off topic here a little bit, but, last week we were on the full moon. And I know a lot of y'all probably did really well snapper fishing. And I'm sure that some of y'all struggled. Last Monday, I struggled mightily snapper fishing. I needed 8 fish, and I went to 15 places to make 8 fish. I'd go to my first one, nice show on the screen, crickets chirping. Go to the next spot, drop down, we'd catch one, then we wouldn't catch any more. I'd run to the next 2 spots, we'd get nothing. I'd run to the next spot, we would get one. And I would just pick it down the line, you know. Was I lazy that I didn't stay long enough and just keep trying? Or did I use my time wisely and make sure that I just kept going until I found fish that would bite, you know? But I made my 8 snappers. I just had to fish a lot of places to do it.
It makes you wonder if it's a timing issue. So sometimes I'll do the same thing. I'll go to a spot where I know there's good fish, and I'll get there early, nothing. I'll go fish a couple other spots throughout the day. I'll get what I need. I'll come back and try that on the way home, and it's on fire.
And it could be timing. It could be that someone fished there 30 minutes before you and you didn't know that.
Which I think is what happened on Monday with you. I think because luckily Tim and I talk a lot when we're both out there fishing with each other, so kind of bounce back and forth on where he is and who's doing what. And you were on good stuff that shouldn't have been that hard to find fish on Monday.
Yeah. And Mark came right behind me and caught 2 real good fish off a place I didn't get a bite.
Man, did that feel good. Tim's like, yeah, there's no fish there, and I sent him back.
I didn't say there was any.
I'm sending
no
back
fish
pictures
there.
of me and my buddies holding
one.
these things up.
But, and it doesn't matter how good you are, there's days that you're not going to produce.
Yep.
The best of the best have bad days. If anybody who tells you they never struggle, they're not. They're just BSing. Because I've come home twice this year when I was very unhappy at the end of the day. I had some fish, but I just didn't have. It wasn't as easy and the way I wanted it to be.
Especially during snapper season.
Well, if it would just be calm enough that we could run wherever we want to go.
Yeah.
But that doesn't seem to want to happen either. You know, live baits, 4 Kings, you know, kind of like all of our bottom fish, cigar minnows, herring, hardtails, are your primary baits. Threadfin herring work good. Threadfin herring don't work as good for live bait trolling. They tend to die really easy and they'll spin super, super bad. So I generally reserve my threadfin herring for bottom fishing. But they will work, especially now if you're fly lining for kings, they work great because they're a big silhouette, they're real silvery, they will get a lot of bites on a fly line rig.
And there are thread fins everywhere right now.
But at least we're off the moon, so maybe the moon pies are gone.
You've seen them. I hate those things.
I caught so many.
Yeah? Do you take them home and eat them? No, just kidding. I'm kidding. I'm just kidding.
Is anyone not familiar with the bait boat? Okay, we got a couple people that don't use the bait boat. So we can go out in the mornings and of course catch cigar minnows. You know, if you're gonna go out there to the pass and catch live cigar minnows, the regular green Hayabusa is fine most of the days. When we're on the full moon like last week, I would have the fluorocarbon ones. And if you're sitting out there and you're fishing beside a boat and you're using just on a normal day with the green ones, and you see somebody over there that's really struggling to catch bait, they probably got them 99-cent bait rigs that we sell. They don't work. Buy a good bait rig. This is one of the things you want to buy, spend a little bit of money on.
Tim's, he works for a tackle shop. So to hear somebody say, yeah, buy the more expensive ones, you're like, yeah, sure. I don't work for the tackle shop. He's absolutely right. That's having the right bait rig. I think sometimes we'll outfish, we'll get 6 at a time, and people are like, why are none of these other people catching stuff? I'm like, because they're using Walmart bait rigs.
Yeah, the question was what size hook. Generally speaking, a 6 or 8. Yeah. The 4 is a little big for 4 is more of almost like a hard, if I was fishing just for hardtails. Yeah, too small is better than too big. Yeah.
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 they were breaking lines off. Instead of using two of the other ones, spend $10. The one good one tends to last multiple trips, multiple days.
Absolutely right. Yeah.
So it's actually cost savings to actually spend the extra and buy the good one right off the bat.
Make sure you use a big enough lead. I see so many people go out there with half-ounce leads. Get a 2 or 3 ounce lead. You know, when you're jigging with a half-ounce lead and you go to kind of and you start getting multiple baits on, they'll flip that lead up into the rig and tangle it a lot worse. If the lead is heavy, they won't tangle the rig as much. And then when you go to pick them up out of the water and you're swinging that lead to you, that heavy lead will come right to you. That little lead, they can move it around a lot. But use a heavy enough lead, 2 to 3 ounces. That was kind of a prelude to the bait boat.
And you were right. And I don't know if, I mean, I'm sure you guys have all caught fish on sabiki rigs, but you brought up a huge point. And if you go back 2 pictures, you're doing it. When that bait rig comes up and you've got that weight on the back, if you do one of these things and get it here and there's like 6, 8-inch long fish just flopping around, getting all tangled up, the best thing to do is grab that lead, hold that thing out this way so those fish are hanging up and down. So you can see in that picture, Tim grabbed the lead.
Right there.
And all those fish are in a good spot. So typically in that point, and I was just taking pictures of him and laughing because we were tarpon fishing and
I had on my banana shorts too.
We weren't really tarpon fishing, so we were like, let's see how many baits we can. We ended up with like 6,000 baits in the live well that day. But so I was just laughing. But to watch him grab it and then spin over the live well, it's a lot easier to use the D-hooker and flip him straight in without getting hands that look like this, where you have little gold hooks in your fingers.
Let me borrow your rod there for a second. And I have clients that do this all the time too. They're right up against the gunnel, and I've tried to tell them, okay, get your bait fish, bring them in the boat, bring the lead to you, and grab it. Well, they do this, and they're just, the further they reach, they're not on 1 foot, and they just, okay, we're going to be out of the boat here in a second. It's not reach out and grab the lead, it's bring the lead to you. But I have clients do this all the time.
Especially the way we bottom fish with leads on a 3-way swivel, and I'm like, just grab onto the lead, and the same thing. But they're reaching like that, and there's a 20-pound red snapper 6 feet away, trying to get in. So,
but the bait boat, the biggest thing I can say about the bait boat is they're out there most every morning. They really want to sell bait. There's days that they run out or they don't catch them or whatever. I make use of the bait boat anytime I can. It's just faster and easier. And if I'm not tournament fishing, the baits from the bait boat are great. When you're going to get bait from the bait boat, for the people who don't know, channel 80 on the radio, most mornings you don't have to call and ask where they're at. You just flip the radio to 80, someone's going to go, hey, where's the bait boat? And they're going to tell you, we're on the east side, we're on the west side, we're by the sea buoy. They'll tell you, you'll hear real fast where they're at. And as soon as you get outside the pass, there's probably going to be a line of boats there anyway at the bait boat. There may be nobody, there may be 10 or 20 boats. You just get in line, and as you're coming up to the bait boat, you're going to hold up 1 scoop, 2 scoops, 3 scoops, however many you want. 1 scoop is 30 baits, that's $20. You're going to ease up, they're going to have their pin. You can see right here, their pin will be on one side that they're dipping out of, and you're going to pull right alongside as you're coming up, and they'll be getting your baits. So as you're pulling up, by the time you get there, he's handing you the net. He hands you the net of bait, you dump it in the live well, put the 20, the 40, whatever dollars in there, throw a donut in there, throw a sandwich, throw $10, tip the bait guys. They work really hard. They'll take extra good care of you next time. They always remember the guys that take care of them. They also remember the guys who get their bait and hit the throttles and wake them. You're going to be on the short side next time. Never wake the bait boat. Just ease off, get a quarter of a mile away, then go. Because I promise you they will remember. but they're all really good guys. If you take good care of them, they'll take really good care of you. You know, it's 30. The baits come. It's $20 for 30 baits. Well, if they give you a scoop of bait, if you get one scoop and you pull them all out and counted them, I guarantee you there's not 30. There's probably 35 or 40 or 42 baits. They never short you baits.
They're good dudes.
Yeah. It's kind of like you come in the store for shrimp, you ask for a dozen shrimp, you're going to get 14 or 15. The only guys that get a dozen shrimp are the ones that we bring their bucket up with 3 dozen shrimp in, and they look in the bucket and they goes, I don't think that's 3 dozen. Like, okay, well, let's go to the back, and we'll dump these into a net, and we'll count them. And we get to 36, we'll put them in your bucket, and the rest of them we'll dump back in the tank. Because we always give 14 or 15 shrimp per dozen. It's not a dozen. Yes, sir. Uh-huh. They were probably just messing with you.
Yeah.
The other captains were calling like 1-0, 2-0, 3-0. What does that mean?
Actually, I haven't heard that.
Yeah. Yeah, 20
Yeah, I
shot.
guess $20 or $30 worth.
Dollars? Okay.
$10.
I just get the usual. I get the usual every time. But I'm with them. So if you listen to Channel 80, I could be the one saying vanilla or chocolate. Like I prefer listening to the bait guys banter than like the Destin Captain's channel. Yeah, I prefer listening to those guys. They're having fun and they're enjoying it. But typically, I mean, when you pull up, if they're laughing and you're laughing, everyone's just having fun. They're good dudes. But I'd normally say 20 shot.
Yeah.
But he just said that they prefer the dollar amount, right? Yeah. I normally I'll say 20 shot because that's plenty of baits for 4 people to last through my trip for the day.
And I normally run private boats, and I have anglers that are not very good at fishing. So we always get, for my guys, it's, at least 3 scoops or 60 shot, and then I make my guys give them 100.
Or you could just buy one of these and not use any bait.
Yeah, but some of my guys aren't that good.
Yeah. I've been casting net Nelwise on my way across the bay. I've been using a lot of those this year. All right, what's next?
So we kind of talked about trolling with lures and trolling with live baits. So I do have a planer rig rigged up. We'll do planers, and then we'll let Mark talk about jigs, I guess. But if you want to fish with a planer, there is a right way and a wrong way to do this. You'll notice that here, you can have my lure.
It's in your hands still.
Cam, on your stinger rigs, you use a circle hook or a J hook,
I use a J hook and a treble hook.
but not a circle hook.
You notice on my planer, there's about 20 feet of monofilament of a 100-pound test right here to a snap swivel, and then my lure will attach to that. This needs to be this long. There's 2 things that can happen. Most people, if they come in the store, will rig their planer like this, and the first time they fish with it, this is a little bit of a pain because the planer gets in, and now I have to hand line this fish the last little bit. Well, they'll take this and cut it off and make it about 4 or 5 feet short. Rigged this way, they catch plenty of fish. Once you shorten the leader down, the little fish will come up to the bait, go to eat it. This planer flipping around, they get scared. They run away. A big fish, he'll eat the duster and the minnow, then eat the planer and cut the whole rig off. This needs to be this long. It has a function and a purpose. And then to store, you know, if you'll just leave this knot rigged all the way to the top, start with the lure end, hook this to a foot of the guide, not in the ring, because that's bad for your guides. Pull this down, wrap it around the reel.
3 seconds before.
Reel it up tight. It's ready to go. So it stores really easy, even with that super long leader on there. And it's just an easy way of rigging for that. Yeah, I use from the back of the planer, I use 100-pound. It's not really for the strength. I use 100-pound because it's big enough I can grab it with my hands and it won't cut me. 80, anywhere between 80 and 125. Just something thick enough that won't cut your hands, because you got a hand line those last 10 or 15, 20 feet. So I come up to the Liberty ship. There's a big ball of bait going around the Liberty ship. I think there might be kings or mahis. How do I know?
I'm just firing jigs. It's easy. So especially too, like when you're trolling, if you find them, if you hook one, you drive back over that spot, you hook another one, you drive back over, you hook a third one. Okay, throw something out there and catch it on one of these. I think we can get away with fishing. I mean, this is a 4,000 size reel, which is small. I mean, we've caught some gigantic fish on these, but we can get away with super light rods, reels, and line and leader. I run 30-pound fluoro on these rigs, whether I'm fishing for bull reds in the bay or, I mean, I've caught keeper snappers on this season. You can tell now my leader's super short just because of retying it from abrasion and all that. We can get away with catching big fish on little gear, especially kings, because I think like on wire and on heavier mono leaders, you get the teeth on them, they'll cut right through it. But on a jig, similar to this, with a single hook on it, when you get that fish to bite, he's chasing that lure, hitting it on the fall, and when you come tight, if that hook's in the corner of his mouth, you've got, 2 inches of lead acting as a chafe guard. So he can't, unless it's a huge king, or I've noticed barracudas love this jig, and kudos will go through jigs pretty fast. If I throw 2 or 3 jigs and they get eaten off, probably not throwing another one, or I might put wire on or something. But for me, with the jigs, realistically, I pitch that thing out as far as I can. I'll just cast it as far as I can in any direction. I think those fish, they're pelagic fish, they're moving around from spot to spot. They could be hanging out on one for a while, but with that much bait, I think they're circling around. And one of your graphics had the old, the weak, the wounded, which I think in your context, you were talking about trolling and mimicking, using your plugs to mimic the young, the weak, the old, and the injured. Ripping a jig across works the same way. If you've got an acre of bait on the surface jumping out of the water, you know there's predator fish around. You know they see that. If you fire a jig off to the edge of them and let it flutter down, I've seen a lot of times on places where we'll pull up to go king fishing, and typically I'll put my trolling motor down, I'll throw a flat line off the back, put that in a rod holder, and I'll have guys just start firing jigs in any direction. The flat line will get hit, but a lot of times I've seen them in the water, because the water in Destin's so clear, you can see the fish swimming around. And sometimes they'll just hang out right over a spot, and you're looking at it and you put a live bait down in front of them, nothing. You kind of pitch something out and let it swim around, nothing. You fire a jig out and rip it past it, that thing will turn and look at it. You won't always get the bite, but to get some kind of reaction out of them, it's like bass fishing. When you throw you know what I'm talking about, when you see, especially when they're bedding and you throw something in the middle of it, and then they're like, get out of my bed, and they eat it. You get that reaction bite from it. But for me, especially on these, I pitch it out as far as I can. I let it sink, especially now in summer, where I think they might be a little bit deeper in hotter water. Let it flutter down, rip it back. I tell guys you can't reel it fast enough, and then when it hits, I mean, it's gonna just inhale. Yeah, I just rip it back fast. Once it's about halfway back, I might open the bail and let it flutter on the way down. And then a lot of times I notice they like it on the fall. So as soon as you close the bail and come tight to it again, there's a fish on. But I mean, it's pretty straightforward.
And, you know, and like I said, you might go to the Liberty ship and there's a big ball of bait sitting there. If you're going bottom fishing today and you're running to the southwest edge and you get 5 miles offshore, 10 miles offshore, and you're running along and you look over there and there's just a random school of bait on top of the water. Well, they're just not a random school of bait sitting over there on top of the water. They're there for a reason. There's some sort of structure that they're hanging above. And if the bait fish are there, there's likely that there's either kings or mahis or blackfin tunas or bonitas there. And if you're running, but we all need bonita for strip baits when we're going bottom fishing for snappers and groupers. And the little jig is perfect. I mean, you're running along, you see the baits over there. Okay, let's pull over there for a second, stop, throw a jig out there a couple of times, catch a couple bonitas for fresh strip baits. I mean, strip baits were, I mean, it's some of my favorite snapper and grouper bait, but it's also, strip baits are great for trolling for more kings. And there's probably been more wahoo, dolphin, tuna, and white marlin caught on bonita strips than, other than a cedar plug, that's probably more fish have been caught on that around the globe than anything.
And it's like, it's a search bait for me. I mean, if I get to a spot and I throw this out 5 or 6 times and don't have anything, I'm like, they probably won't hit the flat line. And I might wait, and plus it gives you something to do. I mean, I don't like trolling. I find it a little bit slow sometimes, and maybe I'm just not as good at it as some other people, or I don't have the patience for it. But if I get to a spot with bait like that and I throw out a flat line on fluoro, which I'll just wait, and then I'll have guys just start firing jigs off in every direction. I've noticed typically I'll hook them on this before the flat line. But I think it's a reaction, and I like shiny colors. And what I notice is the teaser hook, or the teaser on my hook, is very similar to your duster rig. Mm-hmm. But this, in the water, in the sun, the reflection of it going off it, you can see this a long way away. And if I was a king mackerel looking up at that big shoal of bait fish, and I saw one of these things fluttering and kind of jerking around near me, it kind of makes sense how we get away with catching them on this. But I think more so than, I mean, the hookup's probably my favorite part, especially on one of these things, and just laying into that fish. But then there's the whole fight of trying to get that fish to the boat on a rod this small. Can I go in there now?
Sure.
So I think on a conventional rod, especially with the boat and gear, it's kind of just a crank on them and get them to the boat. But for me, I like fighting the fish. I like getting to know that fish. I think it's a little bit more fair. And I would try to claim conservation or something, but I think at this point in my fishing career, I can't claim that anymore. But I think there's just a way to steer that fish, and it's fun for me as a captain to watch an angler on my boat evolve throughout the course of the day and go from just like yanking him back and forth, and they're wearing a hole in his mouth and they're making that fish real mad. It's fun for me throughout the course of the day to watch somebody learn how to steer that fish around. And I think a king and a bonita, smaller mahi, sometimes a tuna, but we were talking about this earlier with one of the guys about tarpon and sharks. Like, you can't really do it on some of those big fish, but I think fish don't have the biggest brains, and I don't think they really know what's happening. But I think if you said shit, so I can say a word, right? If you piss that fish off, he's going to fight back. And if you just keep him coming and he doesn't really know what's going on, he's not going to really fight back. You can steer him around. So typically on the king or the bonita, when they hit, they're going to go whatever direction they want as fast as they can. They're just gone. And you see guys all the time just try to yank them and steer them over here, especially guys. Women are much better anglers when it comes to some of this stuff, because guys will get mad and they'll pull on it. And then that fish doesn't know what's happening, but he's like, I didn't like that, and then he'll pull back. And on a king with small mouth, huge hole in his mouth, the longer that fight lasts, the worse it goes. But that fish will take off full speed, whatever direction it wants to go. And I tell guys, you're not fighting him so much up and down like this, but use the beefier part of that rod. Keep that rod low, and if he's going that way, just kind of keep pressure towards his tail. Eventually that thing will turn, and he'll start coming this way. And all of a sudden your rod will start coming back, and I'll say gain on him. And just keep him coming this way, and all of a sudden he'll start going over this way, and you'll see guys, normally, they just kind of naturally start pulling back this way. And you're like, all right, you're starting to get it. But I think what that fish is doing is when he starts swimming whatever direction he wants to go, he's getting water over his gills, he's getting the oxygen, he's catching his breath. So I have guys on one side of the boat, and all of a sudden that fish is way over on the other side. And you see it all the time where guys are like, I'm going to walk over here and fight it from this side. And I'll say, stick that rod in the water, just put it straight down and steer him back around. And all of a sudden that fish will start coming back around, and you can just watch him steer it. But the better you steer it, the shorter the fight lasts, the healthier the meat, I've noticed, is, because it's not burning himself up. He's getting tired faster. And if you go to release it, that fish will swim away much easier than cranking it in for however long or chasing it around with the boat or something like that. But it's really fun for me to watch people learn to steer that fish. And that translates, I mean, king and bonita, I think, are the easiest fish to learn how to steer them on, because your fight's a couple minutes long, they're running, they're swimming right at you. It's just really fun to watch people do that. But it translates well with snappers too, and groupers, and a way to get away with fighting fish on lighter rods.
Questions? Boy, everybody's an expert tonight, huh? Yes, sir.
I typically just run mine, when I would drag those crystal minnows around, I would run it on 60 or 80 pound. 60 I think is a little light for kings sometimes, because sometimes you hook a wahoo, or sometimes you hook something that's way too big and you lose your plug. I think 80 is probably pretty good. So on my boat, I have a crystal minnow with like maybe 6 feet of 80 pound with a swivel on the, a barrel swivel on the end, so I could just clip it on. In summer, I'll add a little weight. And honestly,
And if you want to go faster, I would add a trolling lead.
yeah. And for me too, I fish braided mainline for everything, whether it's snapper, grouper, amberjack. I'll run a longer wind-on leader for certain fish, but everybody talks about trolling and getting a bite and the stretch in the line. I think where on a heavier rod, like Tim was talking about having a softer tip for kings, where it'll kind of absorb some of that, where the stretch in the line on running mono mainline or a big wind-on leader or something like that, I think a softer rod, I mean, what on 40 or 100 yards of mono, the stretch on a bite's probably what, 4 feet max, something like that. On a floppier rod, like the lighter stuff that we use, I mean, you've got almost 4 feet of give in the rod alone. So I think sometimes where people talk about line stretch and shock absorption, I think the lighter rod, I mean, think about it, I'm a math guy in a different career. I mean, you have forces going one way and things stretching one way. I don't care if you're going from here to here and your line stretching, or you're here to here and your rod's moving. It's the same amount of stretch to me. But I just kept doing it until I found something that worked, you know?
Any more?
Yep, one more. Yes, sir. I think you had that in here.
I have it for the duster rig, but not for, so really all I do for live bait trolling, I'm what you can argue 50-50, put the treble hook in or not. All I put is the single hook right in front of the eyes, not through the eye socket, but the little hard spot in the front, and I'll let the treble hook free dangle. I don't actually put the treble hook in the minnow. I know people who do, and I think if you get the treble hook perfectly centered in the minnow, it's fine. But if you don't get it right in the middle of the minnow, if the minnow gets really a little tired or dies, he spins really easy. If you have him hooked right through the eyes, he'll still swim along even when he's almost dead or dead. I use the same rig with a single hook and a treble hook, and I don't put the treble hook in there either. So next month we were supposed to talk about amberjack, which we're still going to do. Even, when is the seminar? What's the date?
First Tuesday.
I know it's the first Tuesday, but we get so many. Oh, that's good. So we'll do it on the first, the day that amberjack open, and we'll cover amberjack for the whole 3 weeks of amberjack season. Woo. But we'll talk a lot but groupers are going to open up September 1st and be open through the end of the year. So
Grouper and amberjack.
Grouper and amberjack together. Those two will go good together. And so we can cover grouper and amberjack at next month's seminar. And we'll spend time on amberjack, but we'll make sure that we have it to where most everything kind of coincides and can do some crossover.
Well, we're pretty early tonight. You guys have any random questions about anything else that isn't king mackerel related? I'm gonna let Tim answer that. I'm not telling you. So we won first and second place the past couple years.
Yeah.
Most of my biggest ones were about 2-3 miles off the beach.
So the Navarre kayak reefs are always a very good option because it's such a big area. There's about 500 of them pyramids down there, and they cover from about half to 3/4 of a mile offshore and about a mile down the beach. And that's the winter blackfin fishery, especially that January, February blackfin fishing, that is like the spot. But Alex Fogg with the county has done a fantastic job of sinking all these new ships. Now all these new ships that he's put out, they're not necessarily going to have snapper on them. Realistically, it's going to be 2 years before they're good bottom fishing spots. But all those ships are going to hold a tremendous amount of bait. And that's what you're really looking for when you're looking for kings, blackfins, mahis. You got to find the bait. Once you find the bait, the fish are going to come to the bait. So any of those ships this fall are all going to be holding blackfins. Every one of them. Yeah.
Pretty much a orange 5-inch, about a 5-inch top.
Yeah, the crystal minnow. Yeah, about that size. Just about typical to the live bait you'd be using. So I mean, our cigar minnow. Say again. Yeah, for sure. And and I think a lot of the tournament fishermen are catching their winning kings on big baits. So yeah, but for me, I mean, realistically, day in, day out, for me to catch that eating size king that I'd enjoy that have a kid catch, it's typical on the bait that's there. Another thing too I've really noticed is if I buy bait or if I catch bait in the past and use that bait on a spot where there's already a whole bunch of other baits, I find sometimes I get a better bite on those local caught baits. So if I drop a sabiki rig in that shoal of bait we're talking about and catch a herring that came straight out of there that's healthy and nice and matches all of his buddies and throw him out, sometimes I'll get bit on that as opposed to the cigar minnow I got out of the past or something like that. Yeah? Yeah, all right. That feels good. Oh, this is Destin. There's no etiquette in fishing here. No one cares.
If they're sitting there bottom fishing on a trolling motor, pull up as close as you can and circle around them really fast.
Yep. And then when they say something, then you get extra mad at them. You get mad at them instead. But no, I mean for here, I mean there's so many spots to fish in the Gulf. I mean, especially if you're trolling around, if you're doing stuff. If that's the only place you have, and there's somebody on it, go find somewhere new. Just go troll around and find stuff. Like, yeah, like I'm a charter captain. If I pull up to a spot and you're sitting on it, you got there first. I mean, that's yours, unless you came up and I was fishing it yesterday and you marked it and drove away and then came back early the next day and beat me to it. That's a whole different story. But it's I think there's plenty of places to fish. So if somebody's on it, give them some. And again, like I was talking about the jigs, when I mean, they can see that going by like that. If you're spot locked, if you're bottom fishing, if I was king mackerel, I already know you're there. I'm already watching what you're doing. But if I see something out of the corner of my eye over there, I'll probably go check that out anyway. Just by watching them, how they've reacted to the jig. But I don't know why Destin's. Yeah. There's
And that's not a desk. That's anywhere you go.
But luckily that won't be too much longer. Yeah. What else, guys? Anything?
Well, Kayla's going to draw some names out and give y'all some goodies away.
You want my mic?
You can have mine.
Thank you. All right.
Yes, sir.
Let's see who our first winner is. Let's go ahead and do one of the legendary marine towels with a legendary hat. It's going to go to Aaron Henrik. Hey, good job. Give him a round of applause for being the first winner. You are welcome. All right, next prize. So we do have Calypso Marine Deck. Their information is up here, but they do some amazing custom things. If you guys want marine mats on your boats, they have different colors. They have donated a few things here. So we'll do the ruler and maybe a legendary towel with the ruler. And this is going to go to Kim Inslee. Oh, see? Good job. Nice. It's too long. I know. All right, next let's go with this legendary marine hat. We've got Joe Fisher. I've met you once or twice, sir. Yes. Mark, I think you have a couple of things to contribute. I know. I was going to say you need to bring up more prizes. All right, so next we'll do, this is actually going to be one of the mats that go on the top of the coolers. So let's go here. The winner is going to be Matt Jones, I think. No, Matt Jones. All right, next. How about Ferris Powell? Yes, yes. Here you go. You're welcome. Congratulations. That group, I saw your shirt. They're actually from New Orleans. They're from Louisiana, so that's perfect. Oh, okay. I'm just reading your shirt. Okay. Next one is going to be for Michael Burton. It's you over there in the back. Come on down. All right, Mark, where's, oh, sweet, okay. So we've got two of the pelagic, yes, sir. Two of the pelagic buffs. And the first one is going to go to Tim Broom. Bill Groves. All right, and last but not least,
If you think that's you.
okay. I'm not sure the last name. It's another Burton here. Chastity? Is it Chastity Burton? Okay. Congratulations. You guys are matching now. All right. You guys good?
Yep.
I think so.
Coming out tonight. If y'all have any more questions, come up here and talk to us. If not, we'll see you next month on the 1st.